Let's take you right now straight to the convention center in Houston. Senator Ted Cruz is speaking. Let's listen.
The governor called up over 3,000 National Guardsmen to send to Houston. It's now over 13,000 National Guardsmen who's been called up to help with disaster relief. The governor sent boats and helicopters. At the federal level, the Coast Guard deployed more helicopters for high water rescue to help people in need. We also saw all across the spectrum, we saw actually Border Patrol down in the Rio Grande Valley sent up manpower, sent up helicopters, sent up boats, sent up jet skis, sent their teams trained in high water rescue. And within a matter of hours, we saw an enormous increase in the resources on the ground. That was from a cooperation that we've seen from the federal government, the state government, and the county and local government. That is really remarkable, and it's a cooperation. It's across party lines. None of those divisions matter in a time of crisis. What matters is we need to come together and save the people whose lives are at risk. And I'll tell you the most inspiring thing. It is all of the hundreds and thousands of Texans who just stepped up to save their neighbors. When the local officials put out a call, if you've got a flat-bottom boat, if you can help someone in need, please do so. We saw an incredible outpouring from the community. Now, a couple of days ago, I was at the Harris County Emergency Command Center. There's an entire wall covered with Post-its of just Houstonians who called in and said, you know, I've got a boat, I can help. And their name and cell phone number was there. And so as calls came in crisis, they could pick up the phone and call someone on their cell and say, hey, your neighbor 4 blocks over, they're in trouble, can you go get them? And it was an incredible armada of Texans helping Texans. We've seen that in the crisis, and you know, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now with the disaster relief. The number of Texans all across the state who are going to the Red Cross website, going to the Salvation Army website, who are contributing, who are donating, who are volunteering. We're coming together to meet a crisis, and we need to continue to do that. And you know, you asked about the federal response. There's stages to a crisis, to a disaster like this. The first stage is the immediate crisis and dealing with the preservation of lives and coordinating all of the assets to get people out of harm's way. We're nearing the end of that process. We're not yet done. There's still, Beaumont is facing a very dangerous situation, but hopefully in a few days this storm will be done and that first crisis situation will have passed. After that
federal aid money, will you vote yes for it? Yes, you will vote yes for it. And why did you vote no against Sandy then? How can you justify that?
The next stage is rebuilding. The next stage is going to be Texans going back to their homes and seeing what's left. Some may return home, and thank God the floodwaters didn't enter their home and they're able to go back home and be there. Others will discover devastating losses. And the process of rebuilding, there's a process that is led by FEMA at the federal government that involves calculating the losses. People put in insurance claims. The first resource is insurance claims, and then FEMA has a process as a safety net for those who lack sufficient insurance. The process of rebuilding in Texas, it's going to take weeks and then months, and it will take ultimately years to rebuild the devastating damage that occurred. Absolutely yes, Congress will step in and provide very significant resources for the people who have been damaged by this terrible storm. That effort will be led in the Senate by John Cornyn and myself. It will be led in the House by the Texas congressional delegation. We will lead the effort following federal law, following federal statute, which provides that when a natural disaster strikes, that citizens are entitled to have relief, and we have very specific federal formulas that are set up to calculate that. We also have the very explicit commitment of President Trump and the administration. I spent yesterday with the president in Corpus Christi and Austin, and the president was unequivocal in his commitment that the administration would be there for Texas and be there enthusiastically. Now, you are right, there has been some political sniping over Sandy. Sandy was another devastating crisis, and every Texas Republican in Congress supported giving aid to the people of Sandy, to the victims of Sandy. All of us spoke out enthusiastically that of course there should be aid pursuant to the federal statutes to those in harm's way. Most of the Texas congressional delegation voted against the final bill because the final bill got loaded up. It was a $50 billion bill, 70% of which was not emergency aid. Only 30% of that bill was emergency aid. For example, that bill included money for fisheries in Alaska. Now, the last I checked, Hurricane Sandy didn't go anywhere near Alaska, and so the Texas congressional delegation voted against putting unnecessary spending in what should have been an emergency relief bill. In Texas, we're going to see bipartisan support in Congress, across Congress, for providing the aid that Texans need, and it will be the Texas congressional leadership leading the effort to make sure that we have the resources and tools to rebuild.
But then can you guarantee that you will hold the same standards up for this bill and you will vote against aid, in this case, if there's pork in it?
We are going to craft a bill that is dedicated to repairing the damage from Harvey, that is dedicated to the victims of Harvey. That is going to be the focus of crafting this bill, and that is what we should do. And the damage from this storm is going to be massive. The process of quantifying it will take some time. The process of quantifying it, we've got to wait till the floodwaters recede to assess what's been damaged, but on any estimate, this is going to be a massive cost in terms of the damage, and there are federal formulas that lay out what that compensation should be, and I am confident we will see Republicans and Democrats coming together.
A bill that has that kind of pork?
We are going to draft a bill that is focused very directly on disaster relief and the victims of Harvey. That's the job that we should do, and that's the job I believe we're going to do. Yeah.
But will there be, or do you think there will be an outpouring of support from your fellow senators, especially?
All right, so we've just been listening to Senator Ted Cruz. He's talking from Houston. That's actually the convention center where thousands and thousands of people have sought shelter. It's a shelter now. Talking about the road forward for the area and the type of support that the area needs from local governments, from state governments, and from the federal government. And I think perhaps one of the most interesting things that he was asked about was to face up to some of the criticism that he's received, that he, along with some other senators from Texas, voted against a recovery bill for victims of Sandy. He has repeated on a regular basis that the part of the reason that he voted against that bill is because it was filled with pork, extra things that had nothing to do with Sandy relief.
In fact, the Washington Post has done a fact check on Senator Cruz's repeated assertions, in two of them that he just repeated here. One, which is that only 30% of that bill was going for emergency relief. That's incorrect. In fact, what the Washington Post and the Congressional Budget Office found is that 30% of that aid would be spent slowly over the course of many years, as is always required in almost every critical natural disaster that occurs in the United States. The senator also referenced something about fisheries in Alaska, that some of this bill included that. Well, here's what the CBO found, that the bill did include some funding for fisheries in that part of the United States, but they were disaster declarations, in fact, so it would make sense to include them in a disaster relief bill. The senator has been criticized not only by Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, but other Republican lawmakers here in New York, and specifically Peter King.
Yeah, he called it political sniping. That's how he sort of characterized what the criticism that he's receiving right now. And he was asked directly by a reporter, well, would you, when looking into whatever bill comes about to support the victims of this storm/hurricane, would you hold that bill to the same standards that you did for Sandy? He kind of sidestepped it. And he said that, look, we're going to pass a bill that is going to support the victims and give them what they need.
We're going to talk to Amber Phillips from the Washington Post and talk to her about that. And also Steve Shigaris is going to break down some of this, what Senator Cruz calls political sniping. Let's move on.